Come on. I made the motion at the perfect time. I just didn't actually depress the proper link to make it turn
Human
on.
error once again. Okay.
But it would have been the best one of all time.
Okay.
I have something to work on. So
welcome to Jazz Cabbage Cafe, everyone. That's Jamie Lowell. I'm Rick Thompson, your co-hosts.
Those things are all true. And let's knock the sponsor recognition out of the way. We have great sponsors. We are very appreciative of them. And we will let you know who they are now.
He said we, but it's really me. Jazz Cabbage Cafe is sponsored by the Botanical Company, Redemption Cannabis, Pure Leaf Solutions, Detroit Nutrient Company, GrowGreenMI.com. Those guys at Custom 420 promos with their culture clothing.
All right. Right on. So we are going to be joined today by more people. I'm expecting Trish to come on. I think Anton will be on, but he said he's going to be a little bit late. I hope Adam's okay. Adam was on Medical Mondays last night. I bailed a little bit early. I was a little bit too wiped out from the day to stay on that late. Every once in a while, my old manedness catches up with me. But he was on there talking about a lot of stuff. He also brought up the CannaBash, which I want to talk about here. I was hoping he'd jump back in on that today, but man, he's been through a lot of stuff lately. So if he needs to sit a few of these out, that's perfectly understandable. Just hope that he's doing okay. MacKinnon, formerly known as Dan Sky in the days of being the editor-in-chief of High Times, is going to come on. He's coming on kind of last minute, which I really appreciate because we had some stuff lined up that had to get pushed back. So he's always great to have around for conversation and to see what's going on with him and his photography and his artwork and other stuff that he's into and interested in. And of course, he kind of took the lead a little bit and helped us out a lot when we gave an update and a whole show dedication and presentation about the Leonard Peltier story. And I don't think there's a whole lot of new information or any advancements in his situation to report, but we will check in on that again and see what is going on and what kind of conversations are taking place and that kind of stuff. And here's Trish.
Hola. Hello, everybody.
Hey, thanks for joining us.
Yeah.
Hey, cousin Nikolai, thank you very much for jumping in. And anyway, so just getting going here a little bit. Rick and I did attend this event this weekend, CannaBash. Trish, you were not there. You might have made it to such a thing under different circumstances and a different schedule and so forth. But I know you didn't make it there. But you have seen and been parts of discussions of controversies surrounding it and that type of stuff. So you understand what we're talking about in some regards, but
yeah, I've been kicked off of Facebook for a while, and boy, am I glad that I have been.
Yeah. Good time.
I could probably use a time too. Actually, I probably could.
I was just watching the January 6th, the live hearings about January 6th, investigative panel, the hearings, and there was a guy in there who was caught up in that whole thing, and his description was how he was all caught up in social media, and he got all fired up, and he really believed that there was some issue with the election and that it was screwed up, and that he was told to go in there and get it back, and he just got fired up and went in there, and he just described about how he got hyped up, and then he made a distinction. He's like, that was then. Now he goes, since I've gotten away from all that stupid social media stuff, and that was his whole description in his testimony. I thought it was, talk about the power of that stuff. And we're talking about, in this case, I won't get into too many details. We don't really need to go there. That's not the story, but we have a group of people, all passionate activists, all pretty much on the same side, the same goal, all against the same enemy, but finding reasons to really have at it with each other. You know, and I have participated in those. I'm not sitting back judging. I mean, I've gone there myself, and it's just wild to see it. You know, just nice to step back for a second and review it a little bit, and maybe try to prevent getting involved in that stuff in the future.
Any other disasters, right?
Well, friendly fire is one of the ways to destroy any kind of a social organization, right? It was easy. Poor Trish. Bad lighter situation.
Yeah, bad deal around.
But when the police and the state were the enemy, it was easy for everybody to hate in the same direction, right? So we have legalization. We now have regulated marketplace. The state is actually a cooperative partner, even though they may not always do what we want them to do. And law enforcement, for the most part, has laid off of us. So those are no longer the easy enemies for us to all point our hate towards. So Bradley Curtis Powell says, why was there no outside cannabis allowed? That's an excellent question.
Yeah, it's good enough. Good as place as any to get started on a conversation about this. That was like kind of one of the components. There was also a dog rule. There were some other things, I guess, but it's similar to any other event. As I saw it now at Canna Jam, I will say we don't care. If somebody brings in, some cannabis. The last float production I went to, they didn't care if people brought in their own, cannabis, as long as they weren't there trying to sell it. Obviously, I mean, if you have like a
personal use
and you brought it in there to, not necessarily buy from people or not buy as much or whatever your plan is, that was all okay. And but you can imagine in some situations where, you've been to events and they haven't allowed outside food or outside drink or anything like that. And you go in there and you can buy a $10 beer or, whatever it is and stuff. And they are trying to do that to keep the money flowing to those vendors, as opposed to people just bringing in their own stuff. In the old days at Pine Knob, we used to be able to bring in a cooler and do that, and they quit doing it. So, I mean, it's not that outrageous at all. I don't really prefer it, but I will say that was the policy, but it didn't necessarily play out that way all the way around. There are people who had their own joints, and I mean, it was pretty obvious and stuff. Like people brought out their own stash, and
they wanted you and you held your medal up in one hand. They didn't go in your pockets or anything. You could have had anything in there. And all of the dozens and dozens of events I've attended in Michigan, some of them have been like that. It's not the only one that's ever said you can't bring your own cannabis.
And it's just not that uncommon at large. I mean, it's not that. It's not.
It's certainly
we like to have a lot of ideals and then just get like really upset if somebody doesn't meet an ideal. It seems like. And that's one of the issues too. I guess I'll get into now. Both Rick and Latrish. Oh, there you go. There's Rick. Latrish is off video for a moment. Hopefully that's on purpose, and she'll be rejoining.
She was request for lighter last time we talked. So yes.
So and again, everybody involved in these disputes and stuff about this event are passionate activists who've done some good stuff, who have accomplishments under their belts, who understand these issues. And have certain ways of wanting to go about protesting, taking care of things, whatever. We're joined by Malcolm MacKinnon. Thanks for joining us, man.
Glad to be here.
We're talking about a Michigan commercial event right now, and Malcolm MacKinnon happens to be a veteran of cannabis events at large, and I'm sure there are some parallel we could talk about. Hopefully, Trish makes it back on here in a second. But there was protest at before this event that took place, a Michigan licensed cannabis event in Muskegon on Saturday, because some of the big money interests were participating as vendors, and some people's strategy was to boycott the entire event. And that's not the immediate problem for me. The problem for me is assuming that anybody who doesn't take that position then is now an enemy also, and is now getting, like Rick's getting all types of whatever it's worth, social media criticism, and you used to be okay, now we know that you're not, and that kind of ridiculousness and stuff. But I'm not necessarily against like saying, hey, screw that event for that. Let's do that if you want. I just really can't stand forcing that absolute, on anybody else. And all of us hate those people, hate those big money interest players.
Sure.
All of us work against them in different ways. And
well, you have somebody putting on an event. Putting on an event is an arduous process, as we all know. We've all been through it with the Cannabis Cup. You guys were intimately involved in mounting those events. You were, involved. So, it takes a lot of work, and it's there's not a lot of money to be made at these events, but it does support the cannabis community, and so all of these, other vendors who are involved, they're going to suffer because of some protests in the cannabis industry like that. I don't know. It's not fair. There are people working so hard to make a living. This is, as I've always said, the people out there, the entrepreneurs, the people who are working, it's a 24-hour job. They're full-time activists. Their livelihoods are on the line, and we have to support them. And who else is? Because the politicians aren't.
And so people know.
Excuse me.
When you have an event that specifically says that their proceeds are going to get donated towards a charitable cause, it makes it very difficult for you to say, I'm going to deny this charity an extra $10,000 admission fee just because of my morals and my particular personal stance. That's really not tenable when you're talking about helping out people who need it.
We've seen more and more of this in the country, this absolutism on all issues. It's either this or nothing. There's either one extreme or the other. There's no middle ground. There's no talk anymore. There's a lot of yelling, but not a lot of listening. You know what I mean? So, that's kind of, it's been going on. It got worse under Trump.
Yeah, and I want to point out real quick so people know, like when we talk about you being connected to being a veteran of cannabis events, I'm talking about the string of high times events during a time when a lot of us went there and had a lot of fun and they were cool. That changed a little bit over time, especially towards the end a little bit. But
we were, an independent entity. I mean, High Times made a lot of money during the golden years of doing the Cannabis Cup, but we were an independent entity, and we welcomed everybody. We wanted everybody to be involved. We wanted to make more money. So, yeah, it was great. And the best thing about those Cannabis Cups, if I may say so, is you got to meet the entire High Times staff. We're always there working the events. So.
When Malcolm was at High Times, he was the editor-in-chief, known as Dan Sky at the time.
Exactly.
And Representative Johnson is saying we all must work together, and I agree with that.
Right. With those events were the gold standard at that particular time. Certainly
from about 5-6 years, from about 2016, then when I left the magazine, I think everything went south.
Of course,
that's true.
Trish was trying to get in a minute ago. Go ahead, Trish.
Oh yeah, no, actually, I was just saying. That's how I started in the cannabis space, actually, is through events. I've always done events for years. I have family out in Vegas that does events. Events are really hard right now. It's obviously catching up some momentum, but if you don't have funding from the front, you're going to shoot yourself in the foot if there's no other option other than that. So, I mean, at the same time, too, if people will actually show up and support these types of situations that they want to have, they could probably be more like that. But if you're going to have a big entertaining event that actually creates some stimulation and some involvement, it's going to take money, and that's where that comes in with the sponsors. And really, it's really kind of hard to combat that.
People are
it's from my experience is what I'm saying. So I've lost out on many events because of not being able to find the right kind of supporters or the right kind of sponsors.
Yeah.
And it is, you lose money and your time and your effort. And
just for a record too, the event, there's been a few of these now, Malcolm, like these licensed state events, and they haven't really taken off.
Yeah.
But this last one was the first one that kind of like, I mean, I would say the Canna Jam that I was involved in last year was okay. There was a couple thousand people there. It was a good start. It was the best at the time. This one had like 7,000 plus. A lot of good music lined up.
But they're basics to a good event. You want the event to be clean. You want it to be secure. You want people to have a lot of fun. You want to have to be informative. And the thing is to really support, wherever that cup is or whatever the event is, to really support the local music scene. There's a lot of great bands in Michigan, as we all know. So that's always the way I've looked at it. I always felt that getting into the events, just really get a little bit more detail. Like sometimes High Times would spend tremendous amounts of money on a headliner, and the thing is, people weren't coming to see the headliner; they're coming for the pot. That's why people come to these events. They want to smoke, they want to meet people, they want to have a great time. So we spent. I remember sometimes just way too much money. The most notorious one was Lil Wayne. We were going to pay him $80,000, and of course, in the first 15 minutes, he walked off stage because the people weren't responding. Why? Because everybody's high in the audience. All right, so he threw down the microphone and walks off stage. So he said, "Well, you don't get your other 40,000." Way to go.
Well, here's the thing. If they have 7,500 at the festival yesterday, which I totally believe, 7,500 doesn't sound like a stretch to me at all. And if they had 1,000 people watching the music at the end of the night, if they had 1,000 people for Bone Thugs and Harmony, that's a lot for Bone Thugs and Harmony. But what that means is 6,500 people were there not for Bone Thugs and Harmony.
Exactly. Well, you remember when Melissa Etheridge played in Clio, there, it was a very, very casual event where people kind of like people watching from their booths, but maybe 100 people standing on the asphalt watching. That's all. I mean, people come there for the pot. And at the end of a day of smoking and standing on your feet all day in the summertime, I want to go home.
Exactly. In Michigan, we've had several events and other type of things where we've been able to single out and isolate some of these bad players in the marketplace, the Sky Mints, where we've petitioned companies and they've taken names off of banners or removed people from sponsorship. And it is absolutely true that the folks from Canna Jam Fest, the CannaBash, whatever we just went to, certainly didn't advertise Sky Mint's involvement prior to. Thank you, CannaBash. Yes, Jamie's shirt. But they didn't advertise Sky Mint's involvement ahead of time either. There's no reason for you to emphasize a negative. But by the same token, not everybody can just excise from their event all of the people that we decide are just assholes.
Exactly. Yeah, but things don't most events on a website print all of the company logos so everybody can see who's participating. I know they do that.
It wasn't a total secret. It just wasn't emphasized, I think.
Mm-hmm. No, I went on the website ahead of time, and Sky Mint was not one of the listed sponsors, even though we all knew that it was. And frankly, I do a show with Dan Sparrow every week.
He's one of the coordinators.
At 420 Post. And Dan was certainly talking about all the different sponsors they had and never once mentioned Sky Mint. And I wouldn't have either. It was a smart play on his part to not emphasize a negative on an event that he's hosting. And I think, again, a lot of those 7,500 people that went there don't even know that Sky Mints are assholes.
So our position mainly was it's not necessary to protest the entire event, but while you're attending there, don't go to the asshole companies that you don't like.
Give somebody else your money.
There are things you can do. You write up a memorandum or write up a document and hand it out to people about Sky Mint. You can do that.
That's what I was thinking too. I feel like that would be something they can take home too and read again.
Yeah, here's one of the coordinators here too, so thanking us for talking about it. So
yeah, we had such a great time at the event. It was so good. The VIP section was amazing. The fact that it was on the softball fields and it was all spread out meant there was a lot of grass instead of asphalt to walk on, which was much more friendly to the feet. It was all the way around. I mean, other than parking, parking's a struggle for every event. Other than parking, I mean.
So here's some other info from Tom Beller. Tom Beller, of course, not only played in one of the bands at this event, one of my favorites, Echoes of Pink Floyd.
Yeah.
But he and his wife also are the operators and owners of Real Leaf Solutions, a great cultivator in Michigan.
Mm-hmm. And it says the event was created by an event organizer who abandoned the project when the Sparrows had to pick it up. And it was structured in a way that local retailers in Muskegon were all board members who made the decisions on how the event was organized and who could vend. And that's an important thing to know. Oftentimes people who are in organization of an event are not the people making decisions like, do we take this person? Do we not take this person? Thank you, Representative Johnson. We love you too. But the fact is, sometimes you're just stuck with a shit stick and you just got to grab the best end and hope for them. You know?
Listen, there are a lot of people in the industry. I remember, I was out at what was it, a Champs convention a few years back. No, I'm sorry. It was a Cannabis Cup. It was in San Bernardino, and there was a very, very prominent dispensary owner there. I don't want to mention his name, but one of his colleagues was Jack Abrahoff. Can't pronounce Abramowitz or something. God damn it. Abramoff. That was all right. So anyway, this guy was a major lobbyist, completely corrupt, went to prison, and so am I supposed to completely disavow a dispensary because one of their colleagues suddenly, I don't like the fact that John Boehner's in the industry. I don't like the fact that these people have jumped in, but are we supposed to boycott everyone? I mean, when you don't disagree with someone, you have to get everybody else on board. There's no reason for this kind of absolutist behavior. Sorry, that's how I feel about it.
It's an extension of personal ego. When your ego says my opinion is right, and anyone that speaks opposite of my opinion is either unintelligent or flawed, or there's some kind of a media clown that is controlled by George Soros or something.
Right.
That kind of an extremism, it just really cuts both ways. Trish, you wanted to jump in?
Sure, go ahead.
Oh no, I was just agreeing with the Soros thing because it's kind of strange how everything's so connected. Like once you start following like the attorney for the CRA's campaign, it kind of leads you to some pretty crazy stuff. So I thought that was interesting.
But as far as CannaBash goes, I really don't have a whole lot of complaints about it. And as far as I'm concerned, the west side of the state has been severely lacking in large cannabis festivals. So when you have one that's a success like this, that lends itself to greater opportunity for people in our community. When you have a bad festival, then it creates problems. And I'm willing to roast a bad festival. Don't ever get me wrong. When I see things that are ridiculous, I point them out. And if someone's pissed me off, they get what they get. There's no reason to be upset with this.
Robin Schneider here is saying that she was bullied and threatened over this. I'm just pulling up right now.
Yeah, that's true. The fact that the people that we originally started talking about, the few very well-meaning activists, devolved when they weren't successful, devolved from relatively respectful tactics down to very demeaning, insulting, and personally assaultive. And in fact, in one case, even implied violence. So that's one of the reasons we're having this conversation, is to show people that we can't let people who try to bully win. That despite being told that we were betrayers, we went to the event anyway, had a great time, and all of the horrible things that were said about it turned out not to be true. Mm-hmm. And we want people to not listen to those particular folks any longer.
Right. Also,
they've lost respect.
There's room for everybody here too. I mean, you want to put on your own event, be our guest. Go for it. I mean, it's not it's a matter of doing steps and finding the right approval, finding the venue, and so forth and so on. But you can make money at it, and if you feel you can do it better, do it. I mean, it's a wide open field. It truly is, and it only helps our community. So
I'm sorry, Malcolm. Go ahead.
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
I'm just going to read the thing here. We're on Alexa and Spotify and a lot of audio only platforms. So when we have messages posted in the chat, we like to read them so that our audio only people can participate. William Lowry says, "I also think you should be allowed to bring in your own cannabis to a cannabis festival." I agree. I think you should.
Always that way with the High Times Cannabis Cup. No one ever had a problem with that.
Yeah, no, and the reason the Cannabis Cup was so well attended was one of the reasons was you weren't locked into just buying the cannabis that they had there. You could bring your own. As a medical marijuana patient, it's sometimes totally impossible for me to find certain strains of cannabis. They're just not retailly available. So
were people allowed to bring their own, Rick?
Yeah. I'm sorry.
I said, were people allowed to bring their own? I'm sorry, guys. I'm serious. I've not been on Facebook. I've not been paying attention to a lot of things. It's just phone calls and emails,
Sure.
So
people were not allowed to bring their own cannabis to Canna Jam Fest or CannaBash. Excuse me.
What do they do?
That's also your choice too. You can't go there without having an hour or two without what you normally have. Then you have also the decision not to go.
Did they search people? Did they search their bags or something?
No, it was a policy, but it wasn't strictly enforced. There were obviously people there that had their own cannabis, So yes, a lot of these things you can bring your own cannabis, but some you don't, and many things you don't bring anything to. So it's not like it's not as convenient as you may like, but it's not totally unheard of or anything. I mean,
as a thing to complain about, it seems very picky, right?
Right. All right.
No, you don't go to the beer tent and bring your beer, do you?
I mean,
Yeah,
I got
Johnny just
and bring in my own weed.
The
So
fact is,
I mean, like each
the
their own,
fact
I
is, there are
guess.
a lot of other events that do allow you to bring your cannabis in. So you can say that all you want, but it's kind of a false comparison because in the industry, some of them do, some of them don't. My point is just don't hate on the ones that don't. I mean, it's not that unusual. Yep. No one wants to break the rules and risk getting kicked out. That's
no, I didn't. I mean, Rick and I did not bring anything in because of that
Yep.
rule, but I mean,
No.
I'm just saying what the reality of the situation was. So
And to be honest with you, when we got inside, Rare Cannabis had $5 pre-rolls. So although I I would like to be able to bring my own cannabis, that's the nice price.
plus there's VIP swag bags that had stuff to get you started, and it was very
The dab bars,
Very
a
accommodating.
couple dab bars set up. You could have dabbed till you
Absolutely true.
passed out if you wanted to.
Rare Cannabis had a dab bar. You could walk right up. Anybody could. Go ahead, Malcolm.
Were you able to bring a gun?
Honestly,
No,
I don't think
no.
so.
No, they didn't
had
want
metal
weapons in there
detectors.
either.
They wanted you on the way in, so I'm sure they would have detected that.
Okay, just wondering.
Yeah, and chat. I'm sorry, Chris Silva. Jamie, if you could go back to the last comment, please. Chris Silva said, "I would be open to paying more for entry if I was able to bring my own cannabis." That's an interesting concept. If you wanted to bring your own cannabis, maybe it's $5 or $10 more.
But here,
I'm not sure what the logic behind that would be, other than just getting the privilege.
Yeah, but the vendors don't make any less money. Believe me, if they have good product, they're going to sell. It makes no sense to deny the people the right to bring in cannabis. People are not going to make any less money. If the vendors have stuff, great dabs, if they have a dab station, if they, that kind of stuff, people are going to go. You saw what happened in Clio. People did very, very well. There were like 25, 30 booths, in that crisscross in the middle of the racetrack. And it was a great party. And believe me, I saw vendors doing extremely well, especially the seed sellers. They're kicking ass.
I will tell you this, that the lines at the cannabis retailers, certain cannabis retailers, let me just say, were incredibly long, and it was very difficult to wait. Now,
really?
a couple of the protested cannabis retailers, including Sky Mint and High Life Farms, they weren't doing so well. There were no lines at their booths. So,
0 people, none.
And
Anton, you saw it. You were there.
Is it bad product or boycott?
The event.
Boycott.
Is it bad product or boycott?
Well, I'm not sure they have great product, but I can tell you they have been subject to a boycott. Anton, your thoughts about that, though? I mean, you were there, and we've been having quite a discussion now before you joined.
There's nobody there. Yeah. And I'll back up and call out Mr. Berg there. I seen his little ignorant comment there, and about not comparing alcohol to cannabis, which it's not. Chad. Peace, brother. I just don't agree with you. I don't.
Well, while
whatever,
it's true we
but-
don't compare them, the concept of not bringing in product.
Yeah.
inside
Some of
the
these
event
some
is
of these
what that's
people
about.
they don't have the capacity to think outside the box. But other than that, I will say that it was a great event. Sky Mint and High Life Farms were completely empty the entire time. I thought that was nothing but good vibes. I think that you had your caregivers, you had your patients, you had your advocates, you had licensees, you had artists, you had just regular old community folks. Everybody got together and everybody had a great time. And as far as bringing your own cannabis, I mean, if you did the VIP tent, there was more than enough product in there, I think, to keep you high for a little bit. Plus, there was the dab bar. Plus, I mean, shit, I was at the Pure Options tent, and I walked out of there with 28 pre-rolls for $80. So that's an ounce of, and they're good pre-rolls too. It's good product, right? So I think there were deals to be had. The food was good. The people were happy. The vendors, I mean, some of those bud tenders, I don't know where they get their energy from, but kudos to them because everybody was pleasant. And, it's funny because I got to hear some of the behind the scenes stuff too. And what made it more impressive is not everything always goes to plan, right? Behind the scenes. We didn't see any of that. We were just sitting there having a good time. So I think everything from just the getting into the event was easy. Getting to these different places was good. The food trucks were accessible. It was a hot day. People had access to water and just all the different necessities you'd need to have a good time. And it was a blast. I had a good time.
Yeah, I know. As I said before, I mean, putting on a good event is a checklist of all these things that Anton's just mentioned. And, you have to support these good events because it only furthers the industry, as we all know. I mean, really, all the cannabis cups we had, and I really attended so many, at least 25, 30, never any lawlessness of any kind, So you really want to make it a great, great event and really support these because it shows what our cannabis community really is,
You took a softball.
The ambulance guys at one of the High Times Cannabis events, and they said it's easy money. They called it. There's just absolutely nothing to do. There's no emergency. Sometimes you get somebody who's a little disoriented, or if it's warm out, you get some heat stroke people. So, but there's nothing. This is on a regular night. We're running with 3 or 4 calls simultaneously when there's alcohol out there because people have fallen and are bleeding or was in a fight, and now I've got 2 guys next to each other. Both of them hate each other, and they're both beat up pretty bad. So.
Yeah.
Somebody's asking about combining a vending event with commercial entities and caregivers, and that does not happen. I wouldn't mind a world in which that was allowable personally.
That'd be beautiful.
That doesn't happen. What has happened, though, is commercial entities coming back into like more of a caregiver or non-licensed kind of an event scenario, and they have entered their products into some cups, and so it's happened in that way. There's been a combination of those things. It just hasn't happened in the other way yet.
Well, definitely in High Times, we depended on the big ass vendors to help us with paying for the headliners, the music headliners. We gave them a lot of space. They got prime advertising. There's nothing wrong if they're a reputable company to have somebody sponsoring your event on a big time thing. I mean, it's makes perfect business sense. Cannabis, the CannaBash brought to you by somebody or other. So there's nothing wrong with that. Having the big players involved. I mean, they love it. They get the recognition. And they can afford it. So yeah, it's been done many times.
Yeah,
Malcolm, let's not get too supportive of these companies. Are still shutting down caregivers.
Who the fuck's being supportive of these companies? Yeah. Nobody's being supportive of these companies.
So this is another time when you're making the next leap to like supporting the event and thinking that you're supporting one of the vendors.
This is the disconnect between what they hear and what's actually being said. What we're saying is respect everybody's event. There's no reason to attack the event if you don't like a vendor. What they're hearing is you support the vendor because you support the event. There's a disconnect. That's not a cause.
These are people who care about. I mean, I just want to take away the motivation here. It's people that really give a shit about caregivers. So that part's true. Right. And yes, high profile was there too. Yep,
they were there, and they sucked.
Yeah. No.
High profile did well. I'm sorry, highlight is what I was thinking.
But you use discretion in somebody who you work with. Not every big company is bad, for Christ's sake. There's some very reputable big companies out there. I think.
Yeah.
There's a lot of good,
yeah, exactly. So I'm just, let's not get carried away that everybody big is bad.
Some of these folks are just extreme in their thinking. There's an extremist mentality among a very small portion of these folks as well that you're just never going to reason with anyways. But we who were there, and I've met dozens of conversations with people who, just as you explained, Rick, they understand supporting an event, even if there was a licensee or 2 or 3 that you didn't agree with, you just stay the hell away from them, right? You don't frequent them, and that was it was a community vibe. High Life Farms, they were standing there vaping the entire time. Every time I walked by, there was 0 customers there, right? So clearly, a message has gotten out among the community, no matter what that is, whether that's the OG culture community or just the regular people of Muskegon, people were staying away, right? So I think that common sense kind of prevailed there, and it worked. There were no fights. The cops were friendly. There was no bad vibes. Nobody was an asshole. It flowed really well. It was great. And it kind of, Malcolm, like it said, it had a feel of the old school, like the Clio High Times cups back in the day, and I think with a licensed feel to it though too. So it was kind of like a 2.0 version, and it was great.
Right. Yeah. No, it's it can be done again. I mean, I've encouraged everybody. There are some people I know in Oklahoma who were very disappointed with a couple High Times Cannabis Cups that were there, and I just encourage them, do it yourself. I mean, you guys have the wherewithal. I mean, it's not once again, it's a checklist. These events can be done if you have the financial backing. You know, somebody's got some money. And there's a good return on these if you do it right. You know, High Times certainly made their money. You go into business with a major. If you can get the thing done, it can be done. But it takes it takes some planning. There's no doubt about it. But it sounds like these guys did a wonderful job. So that, kudos to them. That's great news.
Nope, I totally agree. So the fact of the matter is we've got just people that are angry. And I can understand they're angry right now. There's some threats against caregivers, and they're very, very cautious about that because of the threats in the legislature that most of us have told them about. So you can be forgiving of your brothers and sisters when they get a little angry. It's just that when your brothers and sisters don't use any tact or discretion when they attack people, or when they actually imply violence, that's the point at which we have to draw the line. And those lines were all crossed. So sometimes it's easy to forgive, but you should never forget. That's my thought.
You can disagree, but no threats. Threats are never okay in any way, shape, or form. I don't care what your cause is or what you believe in. It's never okay, ever.
Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely.
No, so we've talked about CannaBash Fest for a long time, and I think it was a worthy conversation. It's over half an hour now, and it's been the only thing we've chatted about. So I know we've got Malcolm on, and I know we have other things we wanted to talk about as well.
So, the reason that we spent some time on it is because there were some intensities surrounding it, and and a lot of stuff leading up to it. It turned out to be a success. It got things rolling. It was a good place for people around there. We were at a table one time, and there were just a couple locals at the table. They were there because it was nearby, and they thought it was cool, and they were there having a blast.
We're having a great time.
The thing is, I saw one of the comments up there. Use your discretion. Don't boycott the event. Boycott the vendor. I remember when I was, covering the glass industry for High Times, as I'd go to the Champs conventions as a journalist, and you get to learn a lot over 10, 15 years of covering the glass, and the companies that are really doing some bad things, and you stay away from them. I'm not going to cover them in High Times magazine. It's as simple as that. So I don't even say hello or anything. You just move right past, and you go to the guys who are really doing a great job, the artists, so forth, so on. Support those people. So yeah, if you know somebody is a bad guy, if a company is not worthy, why would you patronize them? So,
and confine the penalty to the actual individual that you're angry at. Don't penalize all the other people who are there and who would be collateral damage to someone boycotting an event. So,
once again, these people who are putting on the event, there's a lot of money that's got to be put up in order to do this. They have thousands of dollars at stake, hundreds of thousands of dollars at stake. Mm-hmm. And to impact that, just for your own. Because you want to make sure that you're right and everybody knows it. It's just an absolutist Trumpian conduct.
Malcolm, boy, you are the voice of reason, my friend. That is that makes the most sense to me that I've heard out of the past week. I appreciate that perspective, my friend.
Thank you so much. I can only remember what I said.
Well, that's why it's on video, because we're all too old to
watch it again.
Yeah, that's right. So how are things out in New York, Malcolm?
It's hot right now. Thunderstorms moving in. So it's hot right now. Watching the hearings today. I mean, it's Don't you think Donald Trump has suffered enough? The poor guy.
Hey, Malcolm. Since you brought that up, did you see the guy that was talking about how he got caught up in the social media? And
oh yeah.
Yeah, man. Yeah. I was trying to discuss that a little bit earlier. I thought that was pretty intense.
Yeah, it was, at first, these guys, at first, do we really have to hear from these guys? And as it went along, they gained more and more credibility. I mean, just the fact that they'd been duped, and the guy who was part of the Oath Keepers, he was really lecturing us all about what is to come. So it was a very, very compelling testimony today.
So someone mentioned Loom. I was just quoted in an article about Loom's closing. So you're damn right. We're going to talk about it. We're just going to get to this first. So hang in tight. It's a 2-hour show. We'll get to the Loom stuff. No doubt about it. So go ahead, Malcolm. January 6th really exposed some villainous behavior. I hope that they don't comb me out. I hope that they don't, refuse to recommend charges to the Department of Justice. There's got to be some reckoning for this.
Absolutely. And there should be reckoning for a number of these Congress people as well. Matt Gaetz, Jim Jordan, all these people, Gomer, all of these people are guilty of sedition. And if we are a country of laws, let's use them. He definitely is guilty of sedition. I don't see, of course, we knew that back in a year and a half ago that he was guilty of sedition. So we hear these hearings, we hear all these very, very credible people talking. Is there any doubt? And finally, you see the Republican Party going, gee, maybe he shouldn't be the guy who's leading the party anymore. You can just be hearing the glimmers now, idiots. I mean, seriously. I mean, for God's sake. I mean, no moral character at all, the Republicans. I'm sorry, we probably have a lot of Republicans in the audience. I don't care. I mean, this has been a disgraceful time in America for the last year and a half listening to this crap, and hopefully somebody's going to be held accountable.
Well, I will tell you this. I don't think it's very presidential to take your dinner tray and throw it across the room so that condiments are dripping down the walls of the White House. And, we knew something was squirrely with DT when the Secret Service reported that he insisted on having a lock on his bedroom door so that he could bar entry to the Secret Service. No other president's ever had that. They've always been able to get in there immediately, but Donald Trump insisted on having a lock on his door so he could be totally alone in private.
What is he doing in there?
Well, I think he's got that special secret phone that he talks to Vlad on, right? Some kind of a satellite deal, whatever.
Everything's monitored.
Oh, but what an interesting 4 years of a presidency. We really look like Bolivia for 4 years there with a bumbling dictator that decided that he could just do anything he wanted because he was the prez.
Right.
Go ahead, Mark.
We see all these Supreme Court decisions, and now they're talking about gay rights, and they're talking about gay marriage, and they're talking about all the, and it seems to me that marijuana may be next. I mean, if that is part of their agenda, and you hear Fox News suddenly floating this propaganda that marijuana users are now responsible for mass shootings, and this has been floated a few times, and this is not accidental.
Marijuana psychosis.
This didn't just come off the top of Laura Ingram's pinhead. I mean, this is something that was talked about in production meetings. We're going to start talking about marijuana as being responsible. These things don't just happen by chance. This is part of an agenda, and we are seeing this conservative agenda taking root in America. It's a Christian base, it's evangelical base, it's white supremacist, but there's a lot of stuff going on in America that we have to be aware of what's going on. These guys talking about the militias today, that should sober everybody up, seriously, in these hearings. But I look at marijuana; that could be next on the Supreme Court's agenda.
That guy you're talking about, Malcolm, was saying like what happened was so close to sparking so much more.
That's right. Can you imagine if they had actually gotten to kill Nancy Pelosi or Mike Pence? Can you imagine something like that actually occurred?
Yeah.
And the emboldenedness, how that would help give all the followers all of the strength they needed to do all the crazy things in the back of their mind.
And the fact is that this administration was openly communicating with these people, And it's a weird thing, as I'll tell you, my daughter goes to a Catholic school. My granddaughter goes to a Catholic school over in Whitestone, a few miles away from where I live. And, this guy's picking up his kid from Catholic school with the Proud Boys hat on, really, what would Jesus think? I mean, seriously.
Yeah. Well, they busted the Oath Keepers the other day trying to interrupt peaceful gay pride parades, trying to insert their values and their opinions into someone else's world.
We're showing up. You saw the militia show up in Boston, all the guys in khakis and masks. There's, this is not something that's just isolated. I mean, you've had to convince people for the last year or so. This insurrection was something that was planned. This was not something that was just random, where everybody just kind of showed up.
No, and if you look at the video that they showed, I think in the second day of the hearings, where they showed video of the crowd where the the Proud Boys actually were in line. There were like 6 or 7 of them all together, hand on each other's shoulders as they moved through the crowd as a unit moving in tactically. That was clearly orchestrated. They were all outfitted. They had prepared ahead of time. And there were at least 2 of those individual phalanxes. Hey, Nathan, free Leonard, we agree with that. So the fact that you've got some serious coordination there, people with brought equipment, although they may have been swinging baseball bats and flagpoles at the Capitol, certainly there was some heavy artillery waiting just in the wings for when the revolution really began.
Right. This was.
I'm curious to see what's going to happen with Moore versus Harper, because in my eyes, that's the coup. I don't know if anybody familiar with Moore versus Harper.
Go ahead.
Is it a federal case?
Supreme Court. What that would basically do, in a nutshell, it would give Republicans the authority over elections, meaning that they could choose who will be elected.
Right.
They'll go back to the Republic, and then they will be handled from there.
It's a very
that I think is the coup, because there's a lot of people out there that still say that Donald Trump is the president or is their president, and now we have elections coming up, and the decision will just be able to be made, right?
Right.
With the right justices and with the right laws ruled onto it, he'll win no matter what.
Christ.
So that is going to be huge. It's going to be huge for gerrymandering. It's going to be huge for, it basically is going to break us up into smaller divisions of people.
This Supreme Court has been shitty on a lot of things, obviously, but
Well,
it hasn't done everything.
Yeah. Well, this is what Latricia is talking about. Is basically undermines the will of the voters. It's as simple as that. That is what the plan is. This is a very obscure law, and they're using it just the way they brought in the abortion, controversy from Mississippi in order to make federal law that way. It's just, or to give the states the ability to deny people the abortion. So it's the same thing. It's the same damn thing.
Got to wonder what the boiling point, what's the breaking point in this whole thing?
Well, Brown versus the Board of Education will be the tipping point.
I mean, you think segregation even?
Oh, yeah. It's already on there. It's coming up in another case.
Yeah.
So just make sure that you pay attention to what's going on with you and around you and who's doing what. It's like very important here to pay attention to who you're electing.
Exactly.
Just remember that the Republicans denied President Obama the opportunity to appoint Supreme Court justices for the last year and a half of his administration, saying that it was too close to the election for him to be able to make such a crucial decision over this. Literally, 2 of the justices could have been appointed during the Obama tenure. When Trump came into power, he got those 2, plus he got another justice later on as well. So he really has been able to.
The last justice, the presidential elections had already begun as they were approving the last justice.
Yep. And it was the same guy, Mitch McConnell, who blocked President Obama for a year and a half, that said it was just fine that we approved this guy under the Trump administration. So when we see the propensity to lie amongst lawmakers, either in your state house or in the federal government, it really is. You can't question why people don't trust government anymore, why kids say they don't want to vote, why people tune out news sources or seek alternative sources of information, because anything that seems to be a government mouthpiece is, to me, immediately distrusted.
Right.
We need some moderation. Whatever happened to moderation here? Things have gone too far to the left and too far to the right, and there's this big division. There's probably this big pool of people right in the middle who just want a little bit of homeostasis, something that stabilizes this whole thing before she tips over, because it's just not going in the right way.
I was doing some election numbers in Genesee County recently for Amy's campaign, and we happened to go down to the clerk's office to get the list of registered voters in the state, or in the district, or the county. And there was right around 78,000 people on that list. And there were only 9,000 people that voted in the primary.
Wow.
So, and those are like 2017, 2018 numbers, because there were smaller elections prior to that. So yes, it definitely is it happens in waves. You know, we have these big pushes where elections come around and all these crazy things start to happen around the world, around the country. And then there's always somebody behind that that's very powerful and people pay attention to. Then you don't see anything happen for a couple of years. And the younger voters see how neglectful their fighting, or excuse me, their protesting and all that different argument is made, so they can just give up. So it takes 4 years to put a new voter in a position to vote and trust that it matters, because of the way that elections work and the promises that they make. And then they have 2 years to see their legislator make some magic and do things for the people, and then they see it over and over and over and over again. And again, that's when they lose it. So if they aren't doing what they say they're going to do for people when they're there, it gives people less and less like time to even think about giving their energy to any of it. You know,
i.e. the Supreme
Court. Like it doesn't matter.
I.e. the Supreme Court, who all those justices said they would, you know, abortion is the law of the land. They're not going to touch it. You know, so all of these guys were testified under oath. They all lied. I'm sorry, they lied.
Amy Coney Barrett. You know, that's even a woman that's voting to take away women's rights. It's despicable when a man does it. I think it's even worse when Amy does it. But,
well, it's what Jesus would want.
Anybody can be a religious fanatic.
You know, earlier we just had a comment posted up that talked about Representative Jim Lilly, who had one of several Michigan lawmakers who fled the state to go to pay attention to Donald Trump, I think in Washington, D.C., on an emergency basis so he could help coach them over election issues. And he's also, no coincidence, one of the sponsors of some of the anti-caregiver bills that we've worked so hard to stop here in Michigan. So, you know, it's a common theme. Certain people are jerks in different ways. Daniel J.O.B. writes, Jim Lilly, the representative who introduced anti-caregiver House Bills 5301 through 5303 for the Michigan Cannabis Manufacturers Association, met with Trump to speak about the election results and tried to manipulate our elected officials. That's fact, man. Every single thing he just wrote there, fact.
Right.
So it's one of the reasons why we don't trust government.
You got to wonder what this place is going to look
But who
like.
else is all starting to run for Senate too, right? Did you notice most of the sponsors on that bill as well are also trying to run for Senate or are being termed out right now?
Yeah, I'm not
So
surprised.
It's interesting to see. You know, one of the, I can tell you that we do have. Bear with me. All right. Are you there? Trying to catch up. Can you hear me now?
We can.
No. Okay, there we go. My phone rang. It's really weird because I had it on Do Not Disturb, but that threw me off, and I don't remember what I was going to say.
Well,
Jim Lilly,
Oh my God.
the Republican, the representatives running for senator now, and how coincidentally all of them were assholes. Right.
It's going to be interesting, but I'd like to tell you guys some information because some stuff that we've been doing in the Weedsters and to help improve our situation. We're finding, I mean, it's evident that the burden of proof is actually on us at this point. So I do remember Howell, Jamie, you know, I've been working on this one for a minute too. And of course I get obsessed with something. I just don't stop doing it until I get at least an answer that makes me feel good. Howell and Sealands call on all the mass grows and residential properties and how it's a huge problem and this, that, and the next thing. Well, where's the proof? You know, where's the proof? So I contacted the Michigan State Police Department. I called about 3 different posts to try to figure out what information we would need when I asked the Freedom of Information Act for the activity of that over the course of the last 3 years. And when I talked to one sergeant, he had told me that would be pretty complicated to achieve because there's a lot of counties that just don't respond to those calls. So again, it's an enforcement issue, right? Right? That's automatically saying that this is an enforcement issue. It's like, it's a character situation. If these people don't want to go out and prosecute somebody for growing in their house, they're not going to. And typically, it's not worth paperwork. Anywho, moving forward, I was able to get the right template to send the Freedom of Information Act to the Michigan State Police Department. And I did receive 2 responses. And so far, the response that I've gotten was I need to narrow down what I'm asking for, and that would cost me anywhere between $25,000 or $30,000 to retrieve that information. Now, if they're saying it happens everywhere, blah, 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 whatever the case may be, but does it, or are you just, again, like, it's just a showboating, you know? So I think at where we stand with at least the information that I've received, what I have in documentation is at least going to be able to provide the proof in that argument. And those are kind of the things that I'm going for. Like, where's your proof? Where's your proof? So where do we ask for that? And so those are the things that we've been working on the back end from the Weedsters to contribute towards the Anti-Carrier Act.
So Malcolm, in those shitty bills that were being referenced, also there's the attempt by the big money interests to try to make it so that caregivers, and you know about the caregiver system in Michigan, obviously you've been on the scene quite a bit over the years. Even the medicine that's transferred from the caregiver to the patient has to be tested with the same standard as the commercial industry. It's one of the amendments they'd like to make.
So how you're going to achieve that type of mold and pesticide resistance?
You have a program that's 14 years old that hasn't caused a problem, and now they want to impose this extra.
The growers, the caregivers are usually, 95, 100% of the time, good growers. They don't grow bad stuff. It's just putting more impediments on the caregivers. As simple as that. There's no.
It reminded me of that what Trish was saying, because like they show up with this smoke and mirrors and we got to do this, we better do this. They made it seem like it was urgent and stuff, but they don't provide any good reason.
There's more cost more cost for the caregiver, more cost for the patient.
Right.
Basically,
and it's at the same time too. It's a people's initiative. We've had a ballot initiative for this, so at this point, this is the way it's been voted in, and we should vote them out.
I'll tell you this, we don't have the infrastructure to support that either. If you consider with 25,000 caregivers in the state testing each and every one of their strains individually, because that's what you're supposed to do when you do testing, and then doing that for 4 harvests a year or on a perpetual basis, that would swamp our testing industry to the point where the regulated market couldn't get any of their tests done in a prompt manner, and it would disrupt everything. Same thing with the metric system too. They've also asked that we track and trace every plant in the caregiver system so that it can also be we can stop diversion into the unregulated marketplace by caregivers. But again, you'd put so many new users and so much new data into the metric system, it would become unworkable. And already cannabis licensees are complaining that metric continually goes down or is slow or is unresponsive. So it would just be catastrophic to add all of those different users to those two systems without first building infrastructure. So somebody's good idea really didn't have a whole lot of forethought and planning in front of it.
Well, remember in Colorado was very, very akin to the same thing, accounting for every single gram from seed to sale. It was absolutely ridiculous. And I always wondered, what bureaucrat is checking all of these numbers? Is there somebody really checking all this stuff? I don't think so. And I'm sure the guys are going, yeah, okay, fine. It's got to be
just make criminals out of people. That's what they want to do. That's the return on it. They have more rules, they have more criminals.
Metric just stores data. It doesn't determine, your compliance with your local laws. Metric has data from many, many different states. So it's not Metric's job to be able to police what they take in to decide where there's diversion at. It's the job of the state. And Anton and I will tell you that they're asking the Cannabis Regulatory Agency to take 15%, or they were at one point, to chop their staff by 15% to correspond to some kind of a budgetary requirement that was passed a year ago. It looks like maybe the CRA has sidestepped that because they're kind of self-funded with the way that they get paid from cannabis regulation fees. But the fact is, they don't have the ability or the personnel to be able to constantly monitor all the data that comes in to be able to determine if there's malfeasance going on. It's an easy system to game. It really is.
Yeah.
Rick, everything we've said up until this point assumes that people actually would be able to go out and get the specialty medical grower license that they had pitched, which is dependent upon authorization from the township, which we already know. Look at micro grows, right? I mean, we already know the barriers and the roadblocks. So essentially, by giving these local municipalities that authority, you've already screwed everybody over. And so I think that's where the real barrier is giving that authorization to these locals.
Oftentimes the legislature will try and give something to the people that they are about to disadvantage through their legislative purpose. And one of the things they tried to give, us was an opportunity for caregivers to walk into the market at an easier level. It just didn't happen. And frankly, the proposal that they had was unworkable. Everybody in the industry looked at that and said, caregivers can't qualify for that. So
they love making up problems and then addressing them. It's as simple as that.
And they give you useless gifts in order to pacify the people that they're about to disadvantage.
Right. Remember, in New York City here, they're trying to pass congestion pricing, and sometimes they talk about everybody's got to have a permit in order to park in their neighborhood, and they're saying we're doing this for the residents. No, you're doing it for the tax revenue. Please stop this stuff. It's as simple as that. Traffic congestion brings in money. If you have a permit, you have to pay for the permit. I mean, but they're doing it for you, and they're doing it to protect the consumer, protect the medical marijuana person, but they're not. They're just making up legislation because they're influenced by somebody who doesn't want the caregivers to have this kind of power any longer.
Well, I'll tell you, the biggest trick that they pull on this community, and that happens everywhere, is the creative phraseology they use when they're titling things. Like when they call this anti-caregiver bill the Cannabis Safety Act, right? How public relations finesse is that, to turn something that we clearly see as a threat and turn it into a positive just from creative titling. I mean, Malcolm, you're a former editor of High Times magazine. Sometimes the title sells the story, right?
I think I'm aware of that. Yeah. Certain words on the cover, sex.
You always did a good job titling my articles. I never had a problem with that. But
right.
The sun also rises on hemp. That was beautiful.
Right. Rick wrote a number of features for High Times that I edited over the years, and always very, very, very good to have his stuff. Always remember that one we did the history of marijuana. We had some great illustrations. We had a great illustrator for that thing. So
it was great. It really was, and it was a 4 or 5 page spread. It was actually a really big deal in an internationally distributed magazine. It was quite cool. So,
yeah, it was cool. Very cool. Yeah. Hey, how about that Brittany Griner, huh?
Wow. I love the outcry that we have for it, and everybody is paying attention. But Leonard Peltier. Okay, so I want to feel for Brittany, and I do.
Yeah,
but I know that there's still people here in the United States that have suffered longer for worse.
Nathan was on our show last week, and he brought him up also.
Nathan Phillips, Native American activist.
Yeah, of course, we dedicated a show to him. It was last year.
Right. Yeah, we did. Jean Roach was on, who was there at the shootout in Oglala that day. She was very, very articulate, great guest. It was a very, very good show. Had a lot of good people. Leonard Peltier's son was on that. So yeah, that is. I posted on Facebook the other day because it's terrible that Brittany Griner's in jail. She's been in jail in a Russian prison for 140 days. Leonard Peltier has been in a maximum security prison for 17,000 days. Okay, 46 years. And what was he doing? He was defending his homeland. If people can read about this, please do. Whoisleonardpeltier.info. You can go and check this out. Once again, the FBI rolled up on this group of Indians who were camping, young people, and they did not identify themselves. The Indians thought that they were being attacked by rival groups of Indians on the reservation. A gunfight broke out. In the aftermath, 2 FBI agents were killed, and Leonard Peltier went on the run. Now, there were 2 trials. The first one, the 2 The two defendants were acquitted. The two Indians were actually acquitted in the first trial, but the FBI wanted to get their man. So they railroaded Leonard Peltier as the person who killed these two FBI agents, ignoring all evidence, falsifying ballistic evidence, coercing witnesses. Is one of the true travesties of American injustice. Yeah, please check it out. It's something that I've advocated for a long time.
And watch our show on it. A lot of the basic background is there too. And when I remember leaving that show, learning was what you just said, that there's no real good reason to believe that Leonard Peltier actually committed the crime. And when that light bulb went off during the show, I brought it up, and Malcolm, you said, and basically nobody pretends like that's not the case. Like they readily essentially admit that you're just taking the fall for this.
Right. Well, the fact is, I know a lot of people who are intimately involved in the case, and the fact is the FBI are the ones who are digging their heels in about this. They're the ones who really do not want him released. They feel that he's guilty of these two murders. And when it's come up in the past with the Clinton administration or Bush or Obama, it just didn't get done. There was a lot of hope that Obama would pardon him. There was no hope that Trump would. But this is 46 years. There are people who have committed capital murders who have been out 20 years earlier. The entire world has spoken out for him. I mean, the number of people who are speaking out on his behalf, asking Biden to pardon him, to grant him clemency, so he can at least live the last few years of his life in some kind of peace. He's still in a maximum security prison, maximum security, and hundreds of miles, thousands of miles away from his homeland. And this is one of the things the federal justice system does, is they separate people as far as they can from their relatives, from their families, so they can't be visited. Something that might prop them up and offer them support and offer them hope. The government denies that. It's a completely, barbaric way of imprisoning people, to deny them family time. So, I visited Leonard back in 2016 in prison, had a long conversation with him for a few hours. I wasn't allowed to tape it. They don't allow tape recorders in. I couldn't write down any notes. I had to write furious notes after I was done interviewing him. He is really he's a remarkable guy. He was nominated for the Nobel Peace Prize 3 times. Nelson Mandela spoke out on his behalf, Desmond Tutu, a number of world leaders, and Biden. He's been asked about it a number of times. Nothing seems to happen, and I'm not optimistic that he'll get out before he dies. He's in very, very poor health. He's 73, 74 years old. He's had a number of ailments. So
just to make sure that
from COVID, he's recovering from COVID as well.
Make sure that our viewers know, no one ever claims that he ever had a gun in his hand. No one ever claims that Leonard fired a shot. Right, there are 2 people dead, but he never participated in that act of violence.
That's I don't know if that's particularly true, Rick. I mean, everybody when the FBI rolled up on them, they thought it were the goons, the guardians of the Oglala Nation.
They were unmarked.
They were unmarked. They thought that they were being attacked. Everybody grabbed their rifle. Everybody did. A firefight broke out. There was a lot of firing. I think probably Leonard was shooting. The person who shot and killed the FBI agents is known, but there's no reason to reveal that person. Is that person going to take the fall for these two things as well? They thought they were FBI agents. It's a terrible tragedy. But they were executed at the scene. But it was not Leonard Peltier. And please read the story. Who is Leonard Peltier.info.
I just thought I remembered Gene mentioning that at the time that the shooting started, that Leonard was standing over by the water and he didn't have any weapon in his hand, and that everybody ran, and that he ran in a place where he didn't have, everybody else was firing. But
maybe you're right, Rick. I don't mean to contradict you. Very possible. It was a complete madness and mayhem. Gene Roach, who was on that show, and if people should go back and see that show, she was only 14 at the time. The thing is, when the gunfire first broke out, she didn't think much of it. You know why? Because there had been so much gunfire on the Pine Ridge Reservation over the past 2-3 years that they were used to it. And it took a few minutes a few seconds, I should say, to realize what was going on.
And it was a water ceremony they were performing at the banks of the river at that particular time. So they were all focused on that instead of, so. But back to Brittany though. I mean, it's a horrible tragedy. Sometimes people want to say things like, "Well, she should have known," and blah blah blah. It's not as easy to do as you might think.
Right.
And in real life, it's 0.3 fucking grams. I mean, there's
Right.
nothing that could happen if it
Look, yeah, of course,
exposed to the country or whatever.
if it was actually hers, she made a mistake. I mean, I never took pot across international borders ever. You just don't do it. Why would you risk your freedom for doing something that's stupid for a matter of a quarter ounce or whatever you feel like?
Yeah, not a good idea. Don't expect somebody
Yeah,
to go.
she
"Oh,
was
it's just a
used
little
as
bit."
a tool. Absolutely.
Yeah.
But
Yeah, she
Listen,
definitely was used as a tool.
Yeah, okay, but listen, here's the deal. All people who are in jail for marijuana are being used for political purposes.
Mhm.
It's very simple. The reason is who keeps them in jail? Politics and politicians. If it were free for everybody to use, we wouldn't have this situation. Everybody is being used for political purposes. I want to stay in power. I'm against marijuana. These people should stay in jail. It's all politics. Absolutely, it's being used on an international scale. She's being used as a pawn in the Ukraine war. But I guess there are 40,000 Americans in jail. I did a little research before I posted on Facebook yesterday. 40,000 Americans in jail for pot. 40,000. And it's very, very important that Brittany gets out, but it's very important that everybody else does too.
yeah,
So, but some of the stuff is being said online about Brittany Griner. I mean, she's a 6'9". She's a lesbian. She's got a very deep voice. A lot of racist crap coming out. People just using her as an excuse to just spout the most vile stuff you could possibly imagine. So it's very, very disconcerting. It truly is.
yeah.
They need to let the other guy out as well.
Interesting to see who reveals themselves as racist in
Yeah.
times like this, right?
Right. Well, I'll tell you, you find out who people really are. That's the truth.
No. Yeah, there's a lot of people out there with lots of fake accounts with lots of negative things to say, and they're paid to do that too as well. You'll find people who will try to turn that pot just to be, keep some hate and anger and division going too as well.
What I can't say is the
It's much of a
hyperbole.
tactic, unfortunately.
Yeah, what I can't say is the hyperbole. Like somebody said that if it were LeBron James, he'd be out already. Well, the fact is, LeBron James
Right.
is because he makes $45 million a year or however much, so he doesn't have to play in Russia in order to augment her income. So I mean, she makes a lot of money at $220,000, but it doesn't compare to LeBron. So let's just dispense with that. She plays basketball year round. That's her job, and she got caught in the vice.
It's sad. We talked to the audience earlier and told them that we would discuss the issue of Loom Cannabis here. And in Michigan, Loom is one of the larger cannabis companies. They've recently closed 4 of their 20-some locations for reasons, according to the MLive article that was published today, for reasons that circle around poor-performing stores and having a shrinking market. They still plan on expanding in other locations. They're opening an Ann Arbor location. But Loom is another one of those companies that is not looked upon favorably by Michigan consumers. They have some very predatory habits when it comes to trying to snatch up licenses in newly liberated cities. Sometimes we hear some bad things from ex-employees, which is not always surprising. But in Michigan, we have seen a bit of a consolidation of companies, some going under, some eating each other, right?
Yeah, I actually had the inside information from one of the directors of the board for the Weed Stars. I'm sure you know who I'm talking about, Stacey. She was saying to me, we were talking, and she said a lot of people that she knows who talked about working with Loom in these particular stores that they weren't told at all that it was happening. And they were also asked to sign some type of documentation. I'm not too sure what that is. Maybe Stacey can leave a post or whatnot, or a comment about that. So that draws me to, us moving forward to start working with other people in these type of situations too as well. But yeah, Loom definitely didn't do, justice on the promise that when these big businesses were coming in, that they would make sure that they provide good jobs to people. Kind of seems like a very shitty thing to do. I come from town though, so that I'm like, fuck man,
Rick,
Oh.
did I think I read earlier the Southfield location, they're just going to keep that shit closed until till rec opens up, correct? Or is that the vibe that I got from that comment?
That was posted on Facebook, and although you should always be skeptical of the things you read on Facebook, it seems like a very reputable poster who actually has a legitimate reason to know the people that would be making those decisions. And frankly, if I was Loom, I would want that word to get out there, that although it says 4 locations are closed, it's really 3 kind of and a half. But again, if you're struggling to make ends meet as a corporation, now you're going to maintain a med-only store, even though you're not open and it's not generating any revenue, until a city decides that it's going to open rec. Now, I recognize that it would be a huge advantage to already have your store ready to go as soon as rec is authorized. You get a jump on the whole market from that. But that's a lot of overhead to maintain in the interim. And since there's no active movement in Southfield to go to rec, it seems like that might be a really long-term cash drain on a company that seems to not have a lot of extra cash flow.
Yeah.
Well, a lot of people are getting affected right now. Go ahead, Trish.
Oh, I just said they're just moving to where the money's at. You know, they're following the markets big enough to understand where people are coming in and coming out, what laws are happening, what municipalities are giving away, and traffic and whatnot. So, I mean, it's just a
tough.
thing.
Yep. And we have a very tough, saturated market right now, and some places aren't hacking it, you know, and there's other big money interests that are splitting. Terrapin left not too long ago. There's some talk. I don't really know details, nor have I confirmed it, but I heard that Pleasantries could be splitting the state before too long. Be some mergers, perhaps, with some big companies.
Skymint 315 was a recent merger of note. TerraSend now owns Cookies and Gage here in the state of Michigan. So that's a big conglomeration now. Gage has a good number of stores, and Cookies is one of the fastest growing brand names. So
Cresco just got Columbia here too as well.
Yeah.
If you're familiar with that.
Still several other large players. Loom is, I think, probably the state's largest number of retailers. They claim to have, I think in the article it mentioned 24 or something, and they're trying to build to 29 before the end of the year. So when we look at that, that's a big player in Michigan's unlimited license market.
Yeah, so they haven't done the MCMA thing directly that we immediately know of, but they have been really horrible players, like in the municipalities, positioning themselves to get the licenses that are available and different things that they've done to advantage themselves, and depending on what the circumstances are.
Well, when a community rewards people for being loyal locals, and mom and pops win a license, yay, and Loom's denied, they take them right to court to say that it's unfair to punish us for not being loyal locals because, wow, that's just an unfair standard. And sometimes communities will back off on the threat of lawsuit and change their scoring system in order to not give advantage to the mom and pops that we think should be having advantage. Legally Nifty here says a comment, one of the reasons municipalities opt in is because of the promise of good jobs. Very, very true. So not only are employees screwed, but the opportunities they were promised, they being the municipalities, were ripped away as well. And that's true too. Anytime a business closes, it's tragic. But when you've promised a community, give me a license and I'm going to support this number of people, and then you just sort of drop it because you don't like them anymore, it is a betrayal.
At what stage of functionality is New York in after passing the legalization laws?
We don't really have any legalization. There's no dispensaries yet or anything like that. We're still, the dispensary, you have to be still a medical patient. I think they're still only selling vape cartridges. There's no actual plant matter or something like that. We're way behind the times, man. Way behind the times. I'm very, very happy with my street dealer. Let me put it that way.
Is home growing allowed right now?
Yeah, it is. It is. Yeah, you can grow. I help people out with seeds a few places here in New York City. Not a lot of places to grow unless you live out in the suburbs, but I know some people who have some great outdoor gardens. we're happy to grow. So yeah, I mean, it's we're still way behind the time. We're not like Michigan or Colorado or California or anybody like that. We're way behind. New Jersey's way ahead of us. When Cuomo was governor, he said, "Look, folks, it is legal, meaning people can go to Massachusetts or Connecticut or New Jersey and they can get their pot. It's legal. So can we get with the program and legalize, seriously here, so we don't lose this money to other states?" So,
Well, as Dan just mentioned, even a state that has a license program, there's still great reason for us to use an unregulated market. Here in Michigan, we have $2 billion worth of regulated sales and probably an equal or greater amount of unregulated sales.
well,
And
what's
frankly, the two coexist pretty nicely.
what's the average price for is $200 an ounce in Michigan? Is it more than that, or is it?
You
less?
can get ounces for much less than that.
You can.
Really?
Buck
Yeah.
31 is the
The average
131. I
price
think
published
is
by the
average.
MRA is $131. I believe Anton's mentioning down there.
Yeah.
And I spend a lot of time in dispensaries now doing some work for Redemption Cannabis, and I see $100 zips all day.
Wow. Yeah. Okay, but I can't see that happening in New York, where the voracious push for tax revenue never ends. So
Do you have a local tax?
Yeah, in New York City we have local tax. Yeah.
For cannabis?
I don't know. I'm not a medical patient here in New York. There's nothing wrong with me. Okay, I'm perfectly normal. I've never needed medical marijuana. Okay, you understand that?
Right. Okay.
I'm one of the few people who's completely normal and does not need medical marijuana. I smoke only to get high. All right, so give me a break.
Here's legal. Talking about what I was talking about earlier. This is one of the reasons why we don't really like Lou. This is how they've exercised their will, not necessarily the same way as some of the other big money interests, but
Right.
Yep. Legally nifty. Can you put that back up again, please, James?
yeah, sorry.
For our audio only folks on Spotify and Alexa, Loom has cost small municipalities tons of time and resources when they sue for a license, in the way that we talked about when mom and pops get a license and then they sue the municipality to challenge the scoring system. Director Brisboe of the Cannabis Regulatory Agency said it at iHemp, which was a conference that was recently held in Lansing. They did in Pinckney and another in a small town in the Upper Peninsula. That's straight up predatory, in her opinion, and I agree with her.
They lost in federal court in that Pinckney case.
Yeah. So the fact is, because you got a bunch of lawyers doesn't necessarily mean that it's right for you to try and sue everybody every time. So, yep. Joe Sullivan mentions all the time, $50 to $75 zips, getting texts from dispensaries. So.
Oh, really? Okay. Well, my dealer here in New York, I spend $200 an ounce. Okay. And I don't have a choice. I get what he has. Okay, I don't say he doesn't give me any choices. So this is what it's like in the real world here. You can grow your own. You can't buy it. You can't sell it. So this is New York, and we're still in the Stone Age.
So one of the things that happened when Michigan became legal in 2018 is that it took the hierarchy of the West Coast's legalized states and sort of brought it towards the Midwest. There were some smaller East Coast states that were legal already, but really that was the big switch. And then when we had a Midwestern thing, everybody was worried that it was going to take us a long time to develop. And we got up and running pretty quick. Now, New York has a lot more people as a state than Michigan does. And when they get up and running as quick as they can, hopefully it'll be in a positive model. But right. I expect that to be a real market disruptor, not on the East Coast, but throughout the entire nation.
Well, just remember that New York is not completely liberal. I mean, New York City, we have probably 25 million in the metropolitan area. That includes New Jersey and Connecticut. So you have 8 million in the city, okay? The rest of the state is very, very conservative in places. We may encounter the same kind of thing that they've encountered in California, where municipalities ban dispensaries. I mean, that's not, it's not a completely liberal state. We have 25 million people here. You got 10 million. We'll see what happens. It's
we have the option. We have the opt-in type local decision making. So it is banned specifically.
Right. Right. Look how many. I forget how many municipalities in California are actually do not allow dispensaries, but it's a huge number. It truly is. I can see that happening in New York as well. Remember, there's a lot of tourist areas. Well, a lot of tourist areas probably embrace dispensaries, but there are a lot of very conservative areas. I mean, there's a lot of New York that went for Trump. It's not all New York City liberalism. Let's put it that way.
Here in Michigan, we have less than 200 communities that have said yes to cannabis businesses, but yet we have 1,700 municipalities available to say yes. So our $2 billion a year success is still predicated on a very small number of cities that are allowing most of the. That was nice. It was so nice.
Oh, I'm sorry.
It was great.
My lovely.
Jamie's dog licks his feet. It's not the same thing. I'm just going to say. But the fact is, I mean, in Michigan, we still have a lot more growth. We talked about maybe 2 billion in the regulated and possibly 2 billion plus in the unregulated. One of the ways to recruit some of that unregulated dollars into the regulated marketplace is to increase access by increasing the number of cities that have it available.
It's just so simple. I mean, the thing is, I know that Colorado, I think they've reduced the taxes, but when they first started in 2014, the taxes were so incredibly high for producer, for the grower, for the retailer. It was ridiculous.
35% by the time it was all done back then.
Craziness. Now I think it's calmed down a little bit, but this rush for tax revenue really corrupted the market, and it did so in California as well. I mean, the black market is very, very strong there.
They just recently started lowering some taxes too in California.
Yeah. Right. Is there any other industry that is taxed like this? I mean, is there any industry that I mean, we don't have a liquor lobby like the liquor industry does. We don't have that kind of power yet. But at some point, in order to protect ourselves, as the industry develops and evolves, we're going to need that. We're going to need that kind of lobby.
One of the tools that would have allowed us to get some special protections is if cannabis was still considered to be a medicinal product, and that we could perhaps shelter ourselves under that umbrella. But it really seems as if that dog's out of the house now. So we're really looking at people who evaluate it in more of an adult use scenario. And if there's some medical benefits, well, that's fine for a few people, but really they want to regulate it like they regulate other sin items that are available to general public.
Right.
Which, of course, I think none of us agree it actually meets that description. It's completely unique and deserves its own set of rules. And when you look at the international trade and commodities on the cannabis, it's growing every single year. And our continued reluctance to do anything federally just means we're further behind in that international market.
Absolutely. And the thing is, once again, getting back to, why are we getting this resistance on with the national media, with Fox News suddenly denigrating marijuana once again? When the industry is developing in so many states, so many people are turning to it. Why is there this conservative backlash against marijuana? Because once again, it's not coincidental. There is it's something going on. People don't plan these things. There's not an offhand remark. So I think we have to still be extremely vigilant, because this country is on the conservative pendulum is swinging their way, or the pendulum is swinging the conservative way.
Well, I think if you wanted to support a future Supreme Court decision that took away states' rights to regulate cannabis and enforce a federal stance on all 50 states, this is how you'd start that campaign. You'd start the campaign by re-demonizing cannabis, and this cannabis psychosis causing all these mass shootings. That's one of the quickest and most visceral way for you to lie about cannabis and get people to hate it. Jamie, there was just a comment on there about Loom employees, and do they have any legal recourse?
Well, they were given a severance, it said, and somebody said they were signed. They had to sign something or other. I'm wondering if there was like a non-disclosure that went along with the severance package, and something like that took place. I don't know what then they would give up. They would just agree to that, and then they, unless there was something else going on, there's no legal recourse for anything.
Michigan.
They also said they could apply at other stores too. They're going to allow them to apply at the other stores. So I don't think there's any situation where there's legal resource. They shut down the stores, so there's those positions.
Yep. and unless you've specifically got a contract that entitles you to certain benefits, certain time. I mean, it's an at-will state, and you're entitled to lose your job at any time based on the employer's whim. It's in Michigan, it's not so good. Rep Johnson, Cynthia Johnson says those who are conservative and especially in leadership, check and find out how much they have vested. It's a very good point. There's oftentimes a money trail that forces people in positions of power to vote and do things the way they do.
Got to start digging into the donors, see where all that money's coming from.
Maybe some didn't sign the severance, meaning maybe they didn't accept anything, and so they have no obligation not to talk about stuff they experienced or think about what they're happened when they were there. I don't know.
You should reach out to those people. Reach out to those people. You know, reach out to those people. Let's hear their experience.
Yeah, non-disclosures are notoriously unenforceable too, by the way. So
of course they are. Yeah. Having been through those, I know all about them.
Probably at a higher level than they're trying to do the bud tenders and the guys who sweep the floors at those stores. No
pun intended. Yeah, but regardless, these people should be talked to, because here these people are trying to make a living, trying to support families by being in the cannabis industry, and have this rug yanked out from under them. I mean, reach out to them. It'd be fun to have them on the show.
Yep. I mean, the fact is, if the economic situation requires you to close the store, that's one thing. However, you can do it in a way that's abrupt, or you can do it in a way with grace, where you give people notice, where you say, unfortunately, we have 2 weeks and then you're going to be done. I really hope you're able to use this time to find a different place to go. Here's a way for you to apply within our company itself. We don't want you to have an interrupted supply of cash. So if you're accepted at our other place, you're good to go. There's ways where you can do it with grace and not be totally disruptive to these people's lives.
Well, that's the cannabis industry learning the way, okay? That's the way, seriously. Remember, 20 years ago, they were all outlaws. We're still
but not these guys, though. Loom is being run by the people who own the Bell Tire franchise, which are huge, gigantic, well-financed group of people. So the people that they have making decisions from a business perspective, I would hope, already have experience in how to deal with personnel issues and closures. So
because corporations always treat their employees well.
Certainly. So Starbucks, as it was just pointed out, sometimes closes stores that are considering unionization, which of course is a union busting activity that I thought was federally illegal, but perhaps my knowledge is not as good as theirs.
There are 2 bills right now. If you pay attention to some other legislation, like I do, like crazy, you can see where there are some problems, and there are some representatives trying to resolve that. And one of them would be the lobbying bill. A representative would not be able to become a lobbyist for at least 2 years after they're done serving in the state. And the other one is to end non-disclosure documents. So now they have to basically figure out a new way to be able to get away with issues, of course, because like I said, with these big businesses that are coming here saying that they're creating great jobs for people, and it's high turnover. And after you come from a union town in the auto industry like I do, Amy and I do as well, you start noticing some of the same things that happen, especially if you live through it. And there's a lot of high turnover, a lot of disappointed young people out there that have taken these positions, probably gave their soul. I'm sure some of you remember that one job or that one career where you gave everything you had to it because it really felt like a part of something, or there's some type of naiveness. That's happening all over the place. And it's like it's high school bullshit, really. And these people need to be protected. There's a lot of things that go on with these places because of the way that the regulations are back and forth with things, that they try to be extra cautious to just shut people up by having them sign documents. And, well, we all know what happens when you do that. Unfortunately.
Well, there has been a movement among some workers here in Michigan to perhaps unionize in the cannabis industry. Go ahead, Anton.
I was just going to say, I wonder what the likelihood of a bill passing where they would get rid of NDAs. It just seems like that's the last thing they would ever allow. The fact Information,
Exactly.
information in government it's like oil and water, and they want to keep as tight a hold onto it as they possibly can, and they want to control the flow of the information, and they want to control whose hands it gets into, and they sure as hell don't want anybody at the bottom speaking up, because if the truth got out, how a lot of this shit is
Damn
actually
right.
run. I mean,
Yep.
I think many of us know, we understand, but to see it in black and white and actually, out there in the world, a lot of people, they just don't realize how bad it actually is for some of these folks. I hear stories about how women are treated in the cannabis industry at the lower levels, the bud tender levels and whatnot. And some of the stories you hear, I mean, they're stories, but they're not good ones. A lot of sexual harassment, a lot of just hostile work environment issues. And how are we ever going to solve any of these things if the information doesn't get out there, if they're always sealed up with an NDA? So that'd be great. I think they should get rid of them.
Dee mentions that specifically regarding Loom, corporate mentioned several times they would not give up on the store. The staff worked so hard to drive sales as the summer started. We met our sales goal a month ago, and then they just closed. Part of this is because you've got decisions being made not by people who are at the ground level, realizing the value of the store and the employees, but by someone in a disassociated corporate environment who's looking at numbers on a spreadsheet so they can dispassionately decide which assets to dispose of in order to make the company lighter and more likely to survive. It always hurts when someone loses their job and they really didn't feel like they were going to. Red Setter Farm says union busters are used in the cannabis already. I would agree. There are certain people that get hired for certain job titles where they manage human resources in a way that eliminates people that rock the boat. That's true. Legal Nifty again. Those NDAs are yellow dog contracts, not enforceable in the courts, from what I've been told. Danielle Ross was also on here too, from Stone Depot, and she talks about how NDAs are a scare tactic to keep people in submission. As a retail store manager for Art Van and many other places over the 20 years, I can tell you that NDAs are used exactly as that. You tell someone at the beginning they can't talk about it. You tell someone at the end they can't talk about it.
Right.
And
At the same time, NDAs, if someone is giving away very vital information about the company, it is enforceable. They're not unenforceable. So let's just make that distinction. Right. There's sometimes NDAs, you have privileged information, you have stuff that they could harm the company. So not your knowledge about the company. Certainly, I know stuff about High Times, that I never signed an NDA agreement, by the way. But it's certainly, I mean, it would be very, very damaging to the company.
There are some people at the executive level who certainly do have that. I'm when we're talking about the people at Loom that likely lost their jobs, it would be retail store workers at various levels. It's tough to imagine there's proprietary info that they'd have.
Well, not necessarily. There are grow secrets. There are certain things that people don't want to get out. There are a lot of cultivation techniques. People who are breeding seeds. The breeders are very, very talented people. So I understand an NDA agreement being, but you're probably right. I mean, for somebody who's a bud tender, is it really necessary? I mean, I don't know, but there are. If you have a company, you have proprietary information you don't want disseminated. So, sorry.
I think at this level, the NDAs are used more to control complaining about the company once you leave. What you don't want is someone who leaves your corporation and then spoils the employee pool by spreading a bunch of crap about you, especially with the prevalence of social media nowadays.
On that level, it is unenforceable, because if you are telling the truth about something that other people experience and other people know about, then it's not defamation. You're putting out what actually happened. It's truth. It's not defamation. They really can't enforce it.
And again, the enforceability is important if you get to that level. However, the common understanding most people have when they sign that document is, I do have to keep my lips zipped. And it actually does work as described for many, many people. There are not that many people who are, let's just call it, woke on the legalities of the NDAs.
Right.
So it's very effective for what it does, enforceable or not.
Attorney Josh Covert.
Josh Covert mentions just NDAs and non-competes are generally two different legal things with different legal standards.
Yeah.
Absolutely true. Yes.
Yes. Good
Of
point.
course, he said it. It's true. Josh is the man. So if he said it, it's absolutely true.
Yeah.
So he didn't need my validation on that. But
Right.
Joe Sullivan says caregivers that want commercial, most I know, once the process was learned, they were no longer needed. It is true in the cannabis industry that sometimes business entities will hire people, learn what they know, take their techniques, and then sometimes discard that person for various
Sometimes
reasons.
they take what they've built and then they come in and bring an infusion of cash. And when it's time for there to be some return on all of that work, they then kick some people to the curb.
I'm with Ryan Bringold here, who says I'm with all the union workers. I am too.
Me too.
Seriously,
There you
there's been real disparagement of unions in America over the last few years. The Republicans have been very, very successful in demonizing unions as if they're somehow, whether it's a teachers union, as if they're getting too much money, they're getting too much benefits. They've been very effective in demonizing unions. So absolutely, support unions. The fact that Starbucks is putting people out of business, putting other, closing stores where they actually want to form a union. Just says, Starbucks always tries to present this, humanistic corporate image that they're really working with, indigenous peoples and importing their coffee in the most, wonderful ways. But meanwhile, they treat their workers like, slaves, not slaves. It's pretty bad.
That's a highly charged word at this point. But yes, they really don't respect them in the way that they should, legally or morally, too. A lot of the things we talk about may not be legally required, but are morally expected by society.
That's right. Certain something that's not really talked about enough is just what is moral, what is the right thing to do, is ethical.
If the
And when
cannabis
you have
Adam
industry,
throwing out. Oh, go ahead.
I was going to say, if the cannabis industry did unionize here in Michigan, I wonder what that would look like. What impact? The volatility that would probably add to.
A couple
what we're
places have
seeing now.
unionized, I think, so far. I don't know how isn't that true?
Muskegon did so far. There's a place in Muskegon. I think it's on the east side of the state where the other one is at.
I think
You know,
typically
It got started, at least. For some people.
seems like that would establish at least a base contract in the areas in which they represented, which would establish a base level of pay. Obviously, non-union places might pay a little bit less than the union place if they're struggling. But one of the things it would do would be to establish at least basic standards. And I think right now, because you can be hired in for any amount of money, people are willing to work for $11 at a cannabis facility that does millions of dollars on a weekly basis.
That's ridiculous.
And it protects people from discrimination, and it protects people on all different types of levels that should be available to them in the first place anyway. And what I was going to say, I remember when my grandfather used to talk to us about the sit-down strike. He would mention a lot of times, somebody would smash their hand in a press, and they'd say, you have to be back here tomorrow, or there's going to be somebody standing outside waiting for your job. If you're a person of color, they had you in the hottest spots. These are the things that people had to dwell on, and the type of things that they dwelled on because they continued to let certain behaviors happen before they started working together. So
It allows
it's
for
good to see
negotiations too.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's watching, I come from a whole stream full of laborers, so we're a huge union family over here too as well. But once you start seeing, I think it was when I started looking into Indeed and finding just what people had to say about certain places that they have worked at, and just to see the large amounts of negative feedback. And it just sounds like a lot of people that aren't being heard. So
I'll say this too. There were several commenters that mentioned things about sexual harassment in the workplace during the course of this phone call, this show rather. One of the things that the unions do is establish a protocol for people who are involved in the union to be able to report things, to make it easier, to make it a protected environment for you to speak out. And right now, a lot of people that might be experiencing that kind of discrimination really can't speak out. Oftentimes, there's nepotism involved where an owner uses his relatives, which are Thanks, Jane, for your great comments today. Oftentimes the management is unpunishable no matter what they do because there's some kind of a familial relationship or something else. So having that opportunity is very important. And the Attorney General will tell you there's a hotline you can call for things like that. Yeah, but that's different from actually really knowing what's allowed and what's not allowed.
Right.
So Legal Nifty says we need a labor peace agreement to prevent union busting. Workers unionize for many reasons. One is because they love what they do, they see the potential, and they want to work. So that's certainly a union perspective for sure.
I think people should really read up on the history of unions in America and how corporate America really used its real strong arm tactics. There were real union wars in this country. Watch the movie Matewan, which is a great movie about the coal mining industry in West Virginia, when their attempts to unionize back in the 1940s. I mean, it's a big, absolutely sobering movie. Matewan, everybody should check that out. I mean, the fact that unions are being busted in this country is the result of this rhetoric on Fox News and elsewhere. Unions have been so effective in this country in really giving people a standard of living.
I'll bring this one back on. I mean,
corporations make lots of money. They make lots of money, just as much as the United States government. We found out how much the United States government has then they bailed out everybody in COVID, and when they bailed everybody out in 2008 during that recession. There's plenty of money to fund these things. There's plenty of money to fund university health care, but there are political forces who are standing in the way of real progress in the country, of giving people what they want. The fact is, most people in this country want universal health care. They want abortion. They want an acceptable living wage.
Sensible gun laws.
I love the fact that Biden is talks about all the great jobs that are coming forth. Yeah, it's great. I got 3 of those jobs in order to make ends meet.
Meanwhile, Elon Musk pays $1 in tax or something like that. Would you bring that Danielle quote back up again?
Yeah, this is illustrating Malcolm's point a little bit about some of the things that unions have contributed historically.
It says thank unions for child labor laws, overtime pay, weekends, safety standard. The list goes on and on. Absolutely true. Fact is that paternity leave, maternity leave, all of that was dictated by unions. The right to work law that passed here in Michigan changed Michigan. It certainly did it. It made unions much more difficult to take a firm stronghold. But oftentimes what people see as far as unions go would be a union like the NFL players union or the baseball union, where they look at these and they think, wow, they just secure these overpriced contracts for people. Or in some instances, wow, they arranged a baseball players boycott. There's a lockout going on. So when they see unions in those examples, oftentimes the vision that they have of it, not very positive.
Right. Exactly.
Why shouldn't employees be able to bargain and negotiate with their employers too? Like, if it's really a team and everybody's supposed to be working together, why can't everybody sit down at the table and discuss wages and discuss the work environment and be heard in a manner that can be contractually put together, right? And a lot of, you go into a lot of these places and it's always upper management, the executive level folks. They just will do anything they possibly can to make sure employees don't really have a voice. We say your family, we say your friends, but not really, as long as it doesn't cost us money.
When corporations have a list of debtors or stock owners that they have to answer to, it's always about driving greater profits in order to divide it up amongst the millions and millions of people that actually get their little piece of money in their hands. So the concept of having a reasonable return on investment and then using the extra to pay back the people that got you there in the first place, like to give bonuses. I mean, the big 3 is notorious for having their huge end of year bonuses. Their profit sharing bonuses are thousands of dollars in some instances. So when you have those type of philosophies where you have to drive profit all the time, then cutting things like dental out of the employee health package, or eliminating stepchildren from the employee health package, or eliminating weeks of maternity leave for people, Those are the type of things that bean counters will do in order to do that. They're dehumanizing the individuals, but it's the drive for profit dollars that's making that even possible. In most instances, people would look at that and say, are you fucking kidding me? I'm not taking away maternity leave for expectant mothers who are about to have a child or who have just had a child and need to spend time bonding with them. But a bean counter would say that's too much. You can't have 10 weeks. You can have 4 weeks.
Exactly what happened in Flint, Michigan. The entire workforce was expendable in order to make more money, giving all these jobs to poor workers in Mexico and elsewhere. So you absolutely devastated.
They went after my dad for that. Actually, my dad worked at Fisher 2 in Flint. And when they were starting to move all the shops to Mexico and Tennessee, he'd been there for 11 years. He had a shop rag in his back pocket and went out to get his lunch. And then he was stopped by security, then was removed off the property for theft.
Right.
And he had a couple weeks to go through the court system, and the union got him into court, but they took away his seniority and wanted to move him to Tennessee. So that was kind of the end of it. But that's what they were doing to bust people moving in the union. So
some of the younger listeners should see Roger and Me. It's a movie from 20 years ago, probably a bit more than that.
Only 20?
The documents the closing of GM in Flint, Michigan, what happened to the city. Roger and Me, and it's really an indictment of corporate America.
The rabbit lady.
The Michael Moore movie, who of course is a resident of Michigan as well.
Yep, and really could have stayed in Flint. He published an underground paper called The Voice that I used to deliver along with some of my friends when I was in high school, and we were together in an organization called People in Solidarity with Latin America. And I hung out with Michael Moore when I was in high school at that time. And to be honest with you, to see what he's done with his time and how he's used his voice to engineer change has really been impressive. I just wish he'd actually done more films. There were long periods of time in between films for him where he didn't do anything, and I just felt like maybe I would have liked to see more.
Yeah, well, making a film is an arduous process as well. It's a journey.
He has a very successful podcast here that he broadcasts from Northern Michigan. Josh Cover says it's also possible to look at cutting expenses like labor from the consumer's perspective and see it as a way to lower retail prices. The more spent on labor means consumers pay more. I try to find the balance between doing what's right for the employee with the consumer at the forefront of my mind. Certainly there's ways you can trim the bottom line.
And Josh is a lawyer, but he also works directly in the industry with operating a licensed businesses in the industry.
Right. It's kind of funny that I meant to bring this up earlier when Tricia was talking about sexual harassment. When I was in Colorado, Colorado and Washington were the first to legalize recreationally. I went to so many dispensaries, visited so many, but the people who were bartenders were very, very attractive women for the most part. And I asked the dispensary owners directly, about this. I said, do you do this on purpose? And it was always, yes, we do. So, this is something in the industry that's kind of interesting as well. I just thought there was something. I think it's related to a question, one of the comments that came across the board right now that I'm watching. But it's a real problem in the industry because what do you do? What do you do with a dispensary owner who does that and who admits to it and thinks it's proper, and this is how you lure in customers? This is the cannabis industry as we know it. It's always been that way too.
Yeah,
I just want to say while I'm thinking about it, Med's Cafe, where Josh is, right?
I believe so. The place
That's
has
what I
great
shared.
hash. Yeah. So, well, we're just about rolling up to the end of the Jazz Cabbage Cafe show for today, Jamie.
When do you guys have your primaries in New York, Malcolm?
We just had them. So AOC here in New York City, my congresswoman, she's up again. She won by 73% last time.
Wow.
Go AOC, my woman, she's great. Truly, I have to say I agree with most of what AOC.
She's kind of refreshing, man. The establishment stuff was obviously not going anywhere.
But she's extremely intelligent. I mean, if people you look at her credits, look at her background, she's amazing. And I think she's going to be running for president one of these days. I don't think she's really a palatable candidate for a lot of people in this world, but she has got great ideas, and I think she talks common sense.
I like her. So
Right.
I
I'm
don't
gonna
think
use this moment for a shameless plug, just so I can get it out there. All right, the primaries for us are at about 4.5 weeks, and as the campaign manager for Amy Carter, I'm asking anybody that's in this space who she's been supportive to, or support her at this point. This is the time we need you. So if you are open to helping support, that means knocking doors, phone calls, and making donations. You will be able to find and also tell us what you can help with at amycarter4staterep.com. We have a good chance. We really have a good chance. Even if we seem like we're a little behind, which we're not, but I'm just telling you from meeting lots of different people in the area and whatnot, this is literally as close as a popularity contest as it can be. So we
there are
need your help.
different districts here in the state because of a new statewide legislation that tried to help out the gerrymandering issue. And Amy stepped up as one of the first candidates in a new district, and her campaign's been going pretty strong ever since. And it's, it does have a really good chance. So I agree. A lot can happen in the primaries. People will vote, and 9% voting.
Yeah, people got to vote. People have to vote.
Yeah.
Yes, the big blue wave is heading this way. I hope. I really hope for out of all this. I hope that we actually have a balanced House this election. It'd be nice to see a difference, some bipartisanship, since we haven't had it in 50 years.
When the lawmakers are actually accountable to their constituents. Well, since we're talking about this type of stuff, we have a fundraiser for Dana Nessel coming up this weekend at Ypsilanti.
Very cool.
And any help with this, if you can donate, whether you can make it or not, obviously here's an opportunity. Talk to me for details.
Okay.
Trying to raise a few bucks. This is just coming up here in a couple of days. So,
all right, man.
We'll see y'all there for sure.
Yep.
I'm going to take off.
By the way,
nice talking to y'all. Go ahead.
Thank
What's
you, Trish. Red Setter kind of called me out because I was just at a Vibingster and they had bikini curbside delivery. And isn't that kind of contradictory to the position that I've said here today? And he's sort of not wrong. I mean, the fact is, I'm there doing a job. I'm getting paid. But yeah, that did take place.
And remember that. I mean, I don't want to take up too much time as we are nearing the end here. But like that Liberty Street dispensary, when medical just got started, dispensaries just got up and running. We started in FC with Daryl Stavros, in fact, the host of the Dana Nessel fundraiser, and it got going in Ann Arbor. And one of the things he did was have women in bikinis rolling joints, the big pile of pot, like you walked in there and stuff. And this was just beginning of medical without any state direction on, stores or anything like that. This whole thing seems silly. Yes, we have legalization now. You don't have to be totally medical about it or whatever, but that's still,
Well,
there's always been a movement to sexualize cannabis, primarily because sex is better with cannabis, as many people attest to. So I think that maybe that's the reason.
Yeah, I think too that.
All right, guys, I gotta jump off. I'll talk to you soon. Have a good one.
Trish.
Thank you very much, Trish.
And
Bye,
the fact
guys.
that there really isn't a whole lot of regulation in the industry means that sometimes people push things further than they should. If there was actually a state agency that sent a letter to someone and said, "Did you really do this? Because this violates our law." Right now, we kind of have an overwhelmed state regulatory agency who's not in a position to do that. So people push the limits, I think. But it's all based on consumerism because we know sex sells no matter what it is.
I shot many covers for High Times. I shot many models with pot. Believe me, I receive some criticism now and then for it. But the fact is, You know, let me just be honest. Women have been on the covers of magazines since the Saturday Evening Post in the 1800s. You know, they help sell magazines, and if you make the theme right and you put you do it correctly, I think it's wonderful. There is a line that is crossed. I think putting bikinis, girls in bikinis to deliver pot to the curbside has crossed that line, frankly. And I understand why women would be upset. But the fact is, I just have to say that we got an awful lot of wonderful comments from women about the covers that we did do at High Times that really seemed to really resonate with them. And certainly we tried to get them, you know, the most attractive women we could on the cover. Otherwise, it just didn't work. So
I know a lot of women that look at some of those covers and thought that was empowering to women. Yeah. That you're really showcasing them and their not only their love for cannabis but their sensitivities too. So.
Right. And the thing is, we put mermaid on the cover. I remember a couple twins came along. We made them clones. I mean, we had fun with this kind of stuff. And certainly I shot a beautiful Jamaican woman on the beach in the grill. I just came upon her and shot her, and that became a cover as well. So sometimes I always wondered whether it was anti-beauty or anti-sexism. It was always my wonder. I always kind of wondered which was which.
Well, this brings us to the conclusion of the show. I know we're a little bit over. Anton, I want to thank you for joining us. Malcolm calling from New York. Thanks for being here.
My pleasure.
I enjoyed the
Trish,
conversation.
who was here just until moments ago. We appreciate her being on today too.
Yeah. Well, and Rep. Cynthia Johnson, who was on and made many comments, and all of the different business owners.
Robin Snyder and Connie
Snyder. Tom Beller, the Sparrows, both Dan and Connie both commented today too, and they're the masterminds behind the great big very successful.
A lot of people chiming in on a lot of these issues, kind of Ryan and Joe and a lot of people. Yeah. So very cool today.
Fast-paced show. Very
appreciate having me. Thank you so much.
Thanks again. We'll look forward to doing it again, Malcolm.
We'll do it again, man. Really appreciate it.
Anytime.
Thanks so much for having a great Jazz Cabbage Cafe with us today.
Rick, you want to sum anything up?
No, I mean, look, there was just so much information here today. We did really 3 separate segments. We talked about Loom and all the different things about that. We also talked about, the first part with CannaBash Jam. There's just so much to process. You really have to rewind and listen or watch a couple times to pick up on all the nuances of things that were being said. But overall, we're still a community. A couple of people are a little unhappy about the way certain things went down, but we're still a community. We're talking together, we're working together, and this is the example that others should follow.
Right on. Thanks a lot, everybody. Jazz Cabbage Cafe.
Take care.